Our speaker is Cody Horton. He is the Managing Director of Diverse Recruiting Experts. His topic is preparation and performance, how your story impacts business success. Cody is the founder and managing director for Diverse Recruiting Experts, LLC. He serves his team, clients, and candidates with diversity recruiting leadership expertise. Prior to embarking on this entrepreneurial journey, he spent over 20 years in a variety of leadership roles in the U.S. Navy, and then for Walmart, Microsoft, Dell, Deloitte, Rackspace, ThoughtWorks, and SunPower. Wow, what a guy. Let's give a very warm welcome to Cody Horton.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely thrilled to join you. I think I have all those jobs just because I can never keep a job. So that's, I think I'm in a good place. Learned a lot with all the jobs, and I'm really happy to be able to share anything. I tend to want to just kind of keep this not as formal. So if you've got a question, certainly unmic and ask me. You can stop me, and I'm just going to talk through a few things. The other thing is if it comes in the chat, I've got a monitor over here. I'll be trying to look at the chat. I'm not the best at that, so get some help on those. I put my LinkedIn link in the chat box, and I'll make sure everyone has my contact information. So it's really a pleasure to be here and to share a little bit with you. I've got a few slides. It's interesting you're talking about video interviews. Years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I started being a video interview champion and trying to help companies. HireVue was the first company that I worked with, and they've got an amazing platform, but there are lots of other platforms out there. And I'll put in the chat box a link to a webinar that we did recently on interviews. So what I was hoping to share today, and I'll put this slide up just so you can see that, but I'm happy to also take these down. If I'm talking and what I'm saying doesn't match what's on the slide, let me know, because that means I shared the wrong screen. So in these searches, when you're trying to, let's assume you've done some research, you found a company, and you're just trying to share your expertise. I always tell people to start with the end in mind, and what I mean by that is start the conversation, especially in the interviews, as if it's the kind of job you've already got that type of job. I also think that as you're searching for the job and as you're prepping and getting your information out so that people recognize you, I mean, the whole goal is to get more eyeballs from recruiters and hiring teams onto your profile. And if you're already interacting as if you're already in that role, whether you're changing careers or you're trying to get back into a field, or you're just in transition, it's important to be able to share information related to the field and the industry and the company. And I'll share a little bit about how you might do that research. Probably everybody on this call is better at the job search piece than I am. But what I'm coming from is from the position of what a recruiter is looking for and what a hiring manager is looking for. I started my career in IT, and so I knew people that came in and they demonstrated the values and the behaviors that we were looking for, not necessarily the skills, because a lot of companies are realizing you can teach the skill. And so I would say start with the end in mind, kind of how you see yourself, how you see that role, and that is a good place to go at the beginning. So I have a bunch of different slides. I wasn't exactly sure what to talk about, but since you've got some interviewer training, some of the stuff I was going to talk about is how do you make that interview come to life, right? Looking at it, because we do interviewer training for the interviewers, but a lot of times when candidates are going through the interview process and how to learn how to interview, they're doing it from a candidate perspective. I flip it upside down and say, do it as if you were the interviewer. Answer the questions in a similar way that if you were the interviewer, you would be expecting to get those. And I'm just curious for the group here, how many people have actually been involved in the hiring process where you're actually assessing candidates for interviews versus in this space where you're being an interview? Just kind of show of hands what that looks like, or type it in the chat box. So we've got a ton of experience here, and you already know what that looks like. Sometimes we don't take our own advice, though. We don't do the stuff that we were looking for when we were actually interviewing those candidates. And one of the things that is critical that companies are looking for, and hiring managers and recruiters, is, hey, did this person research? Does this person communicate in a way that I can truly understand what they're doing? You're probably getting taught the STAR method or some other acronym that allows you to answer questions. But the thing to keep in mind, I'm going to share a thing called Sparkle and Dice. And these are two ways to actually fill in all the details. This should be complementary to what you're learning already in the interview process, but it just gives you a way to answer questions in the way some of those trained interviewers have been taught to listen for the question. Because I teach interviewers to listen for STAR, right? And I teach them to listen for Spark or Sparkle. And so if you're answering the questions in that way and telling your story and bringing it to life with the details, they can't help but to think this was a great candidate. And so the first thing, though, is they're looking to see, did you research this opportunity, right? That's the beginning of the process. Some of the things that you want to research to be able to talk about with the client and with the interviewer is, what do you know about this company? Do you know their mission? Do you know their vision? Have you taken a look at their financials? If it's a not a public company, there are ways you can look for investor information. You can look at Crunchbase and some other places to see how much money did they get from their investors. If it's a publicly traded company, you can look at their 10Q and their 10K. So that's the financial reports by quarter and annually. A lot of candidates never look at that. Just from a, just kind of either show of hands or in the chat box, how many people spend time looking at the 10K and the 10Q for companies or something financially related? I can see a couple people. Looks like we got some folks do that. That's a powerful tool. A lot of times the company's talking about where they're going. They're talking about the things they're doing, which gives you an advantage because then you can actually know where to research and you can know things to put in when you are having a conversation with them. They're going to realize that, oh, this person actually did some research for us. The other thing.
This is Kathy. May I ask you a quick question about that?
You bet.
So if somebody wants to look at that, is the best place to look for the financial information Yahoo Financials, or is there another place that's better?
Yeah, great question. You can certainly get finance if they're publicly traded. You can certainly get that financial information off Yahoo, off of Fidelity, off any of the companies that organizations that deal with financial reporting, Bloomberg. But you can also go to most companies. The publicly traded companies post their financials on their website. A lot of times it's under investor relations. So if you go to the investor relations section, you find a few things probably. It may be their financials and their 10K, their 10Q. You may also find a link to their reporting, so their quarterly results reporting. They get on and they talk about it with their CFO, with their CEO. And so you learn a lot just by looking at the financials and where the company's going. So even in some cases, you're going to see forward-looking statements, right? Things that they said, this is where we're going. But it just gives you an idea to understand the health of a company, and there's a wealth of information there. Any other questions on that? I'm going to check that out. Let's see.
You mentioned if a company is not public, and you mentioned something, I know you said investors, but you said another site that I didn't quite catch. Can you remember what that is?
Yeah, and I'm going to take a note to make it to send some places you can look. But this one is called Crunchbase. So if you just do a search on Crunchbase, so that's going to let you see who invested, how much money did they invest. It's also going to show you who the CEO is. There'll also be other information on there around who their competitors are. So a lot of times when you're doing research on a company, you want to know who the competitors are so that you have other options that you can look at. Now, Crunchbase is a subscription base, but there's a free version. There's another site you can look at. It's called Owler, Owler. So if you go to owler.com, it'll have more information that allows you to actually learn more about those companies and their competitors and their investors. And so those are places that you could go to find companies that are probably, they're not publicly traded, but you can look for the investors.
That's exactly what I needed. Thank you so much.
You bet.
For those unfamiliar with SEC forms, 10K and 10Q are forms that they file from the Security Exchange Commission, with the Security Exchange Commission. So they're public information.
Hey, Cody, how about nonprofits, .orgs? Is there a different database to look at or one you might recommend?
I haven't done as much research. I can do a little research and find out on the nonprofits. I should know more about the nonprofits because I just got on a board of a nonprofit, and it's a whole different world than the world I have been in. So I feel like the kid that's learning everything, but that I don't know the answer to that one, but I can find out more about that. If anybody knows that, definitely feel free to share it. Great. And then some of these questions, if we can capture some of these questions, I'll save the chat file in the chat, and then I'll go back and make sure I don't miss something. I think is this being recorded as well?
Yes, it's being recorded, and there are also some people that are taking notes and putting down notes in the chat box for you. Perfect.
If somebody can capture that, so I have my action items, because I'm a recruiter, so we get up talking, waving our arms all the time, and don't always take the best notes. So these are great questions. I really appreciate the questions that you're asking. So the other places is just to go in and know those roles. I know you're getting this information. One of the things to look at more specifically, though, when you're trying to understand the role in the company, is look for any values-based things that the company says are important. Look for statements around what they think are the strengths of their workforce, because typically what that's going to translate to is what they're going to be probing you on in the interview, if they've had the practice of doing it. Now, not every company has the interviewer capability to truly be able to assess. So some of the things you want to be able to do as the candidate is to mitigate a poor interviewer. And so things that they should be asking you that they may not ask in the right way, you'll want to tee up your answer in a way that it addresses those values that you discover. Anything around skills, anything that they may not ask, and you saw that it said that in the job description. Because what happens with the interviewer is they may forget to ask you a question, or they may do a poor job of asking you a question. For example, they might ask you a surface level question about a specific technology. If you don't know the answer to that technology or that process, they're going to write it off and say, oh, doesn't know this. But if you understand where they're coming from, you can say, I haven't worked with that specific thing, but here's what I've done that's transferable to that same thing. And you can talk around the values, how you learn, how you go about approaching it, any competencies that show up as well. When you're interviewing with typically, are you finding that you get to a couple of questions, they ask those questions and they move on, and you're thinking, wow, I didn't get to tell the rest of my story? Is anybody having that kind of experience with some of the interviews that you might be doing, if you're already doing interviews?
I think that's common.
Yeah, it's more common than you could ever imagine. And so by prepping for that scenario, you get past what that client, and I know they're probably talking about this in your interviewer training, but it happens all the time, even with recruiters who've been doing this for a while, because we are quickly trying to get through everything we need to get through, and we're checking boxes, and I'm just unchecking that box, right? I'm giving you a way to uncheck that box. So
I have a question about your slide. On the bottom of your slide, it says practice, create a list of items you might.
Yeah, that means, so what that means is, so we're going to create a list of items that you might need to know about, that you might want to research, right? I'm sharing, look at the company, look at the mission, look at the vision, look at the financials, look at the role, the skills, the competencies, look at press releases, social media, and even search for lawsuits with that company, right? When you go in with information about a lawsuit, you may not bring it up in the interview, but you know of a few things that it might inform some of the questions you're going to ask. And so one of the things I was going to have the group do is maybe practice some of the items or share a list of items, other items that are on here that you might go to look at to research that opportunity. I'm actually going to share a bunch with you, but I thought it would be a great idea just to get your thinking about it, because my list isn't going to be all inclusive. And so if you were thinking about, hey, what else might I research, or what else have I researched that's not on this existing list? What are some of the things that come to mind for people in the group? You can either unmic or put it in the chat box.
I think one's the history of the company, kind of their origin story.
Great one. Anything else?
I had the experience once of looking up an organization that they belong to, like a professional association that they were part of. But it turned out that, and I read those values and principles and such, but it turned out once I started working for the company that they didn't actually adhere to some of those principles. And so it was it ended up being a source of conflict. And that's not that it wasn't a good tool. It's just, I don't know how to deal with a situation where their professional association says we do this as a matter of ethics, and the actual employer doesn't do it that way.
And Julie, you're making a great point. A lot of time, I always tell people retention starts with recruiting, which what that means is if you set expectations for your candidates up front, they understand realistically what they should expect. How does work get done? How do decisions get made? If they know that up front, then they're making a decision to come in and say, okay, this is what I understand. You don't get sticker shock basically when you start the job and you realize, oh, this is nothing like they told me it was, because everyone's got their best at the beginning of the interview process and at the beginning of a hire. Everyone's on their best behavior. You really understand more as you move along as an employee in the company. So I think that's a great point, which is one of the reasons I think it's important to look for lawsuits, look for feedback on Glassdoor. Yeah, everybody will discard the Glassdoor feedback because it's normally a disgruntled employee that left, but there's some relevance to that content. And if you dig in a little bit more, it helps you understand and know a little bit more. And also think about for you personally, how might you deal with the scenario if you were faced with a scenario that got brought up either in the lawsuit or in your research. So it's a great point. Any other?
Is there any public place you can find turnover rate?
A lot of times in the financials, it'll have a head count number. And so if you look at, so you're not going to get the specific rate, but if you look from year over year, what was the total head count for the organization? And if it's broken out by division, you can get an idea. You can do some math yourself, right? And say, oh, well, this year they had this many people. Why is the number so low this year? Or why is the number so big this year? So you get an idea of what that looks like year over year. So you can do that. If there's a place to find where turnover is published, I'm not sure. I mean, and I've been able to get it from companies just from talking to them. So if anybody knows of a place where they actually publish the turnover rate, that'd be helpful. I'll take an action to look to see if there's any place that actual.
One of my people, Kristen, says that LinkedIn has an average tenure.
Yeah, that's a great
data that sounds useful.
Yeah, that's really useful, and they've got a chart there, and they show everyone. So that's definitely a place that you can go to get that. In fact, I'll pop up if we have the time. I'll pop the link. I'll share a LinkedIn screen to show you a couple of things. One is how to look at the alumni, and two is how to look at more information on the company and how you might take advantage of it. Are you talking, Ramona? Are you saying something to us?
We do have a question that says, hi, Cody, what questions can you ask to the hiring manager during an interview to see if that place is not toxic or to figure out if it's a good place to work? Are there any behavioral questions that you recommend asking the interviewer.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to get to some questions that you should be prepared to ask all the time. So I'll get to those. So I'll move to this next slide where it's going to be a little bit of an eye chart for you. But this next slide actually shows, here are some places, and you'll have these slides. I'll make sure you have all this. Here are some other places where you can acquire the knowledge, right? Because knowledge is power. And you can look at industry-specific portals and sites. I won't read this off to you. But there are some places that you could go look that maybe we don't even look at some of these places, right? White papers, press releases, any news stories that are out there. What does their workforce look like, right? Some of the employees in the company will have their resumes posted on LinkedIn. So feel free, like a candidate or like a recruiter, to look at their stuff. I mean, put yourself in the mindset of being a private investigator, which is how recruiters are. We behave as private investigators. We're trying to find as much information as we can about the organization. And there's no better way to find out about the organization than to look at the people that work there already. And so I'll show you a way to get to some of the people in the organization. Look for speaker lists and bios and any kind of blogs that they're putting out there. Are there discussion groups that are out there? Some of the tools that you can look at, I won't read this whole list off to you. But some of the important ones are former employees. So one of the things you could do is connect with people who used to work there and say, hey, I'm considering opportunities with this organization. Would love to just learn a little bit more about your experience there and about the company. There's no better place to go than a former employee, because they're going to give you, hey, we loved it, or hey, it was very, and I'd never go back there, and I wouldn't recommend anybody go back there. They might not get that strong with it, but they're going to share something. You can also look at the other jobs that they're posting outside of what you're looking for, and look at lots of different data points. Some of the tools that you can use, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media. And with COVID now, everyone's remote. So companies are being forced to increase their online presence, which means there's more information available to you as a candidate to really start to dig in a little bit more. I think I see a question. Okay, I saw what questions can you ask? Okay, good. Anything not on this list right now that somebody thinks about that would be a great place to acquire more knowledge about a company that we don't have here? Okay. So this was one of the questions that came up, and this isn't all inclusive, but here's some questions that you might ask people. These are the hiring managers and the interviews, right? Hey, what are the big bets that you have, and what are the goals that you have? I won't read this entire list, but what does success look like? And you can drill down in that and ask, what does failure look like, right? What has caused people not to be successful in this role? You can also ask them, is this a new role or is this a backfill? Because that's going to give you a lot of information about the job. If they say it's a brand new role because we're going to have new capability, that's different than saying, hey, this is a backfill because the last 3 people in this role were not successful. That's a red flag, and it should cause you to ask more questions. And some ways that you can say, why is this role open and why has nobody been successful? As you can just ask them in this way: how did this role come to be open, right? That's a why question. But it's not as, it doesn't put people on the defensive as saying why, right? It's like when my family says, when my wife tells me, why didn't you take out the trash? That's a whole nother kind of question, right? Versus, hey, would taking out the trash today fit? I already know what she's asking me, so I'm still going to be offended by it. But at the end of the day, it's the whole, how do you ask the question that gets you to some of that information. One of the other questions that you want to ask people is, how do things get done here, right? How are decisions made? What does it take to be successful with onboarding? What's the ramp up time? And those are questions that you would ask to get to some of this toxicity. And in some cases, you may just say, hey, I was looking at the reviews on Glassdoor, and it mentioned this. what can you tell me about that, right? And people will be willing to share. One, it shows you did your homework. It's just two, you'll be able to just kind of gauge what that looks like and find a way to get to that question. Because what you're really trying to find out in those questions is this going to be a place that I'm going to be a match? It's going to be a match for me, right? Do I think I can do this work? Is it even possible to be successful in this company, so that you're not, hitting this revolving door? Any other key questions that you can think of that anybody would share with the group? Okay.
I think it's good.
All right. So, I'll make sure you get any other stuff. So here's one of the things I want to share this, because this is what really gets people no hired, more so than the skills in a lot of cases, is knowing the values. Now, these aren't the values for all the companies. I just threw this up here as an example of what you might be dealing with. So knowing the company values also keeps you from being hit with this phrase. I'm sure you've heard this phrase. They're not a fit. They're not a culture fit. They're not a culture match, right? That's code for something else. It's code for something that may be a values match. So what we're trying to do now is get companies to hire for values and behaviors versus culture fit, because the people doing the interviewing don't necessarily know what culture fit really means. They know the part that they kind of picked up on, and it's important to them. So somebody may, if you take a typical sales organization, drive, right? Are they hungry? Are they getting out there, getting it done? Associating that with someone who is maybe a little bit more outgoing versus introverted. And so they're thinking this outgoing personality is the one we need in sales, and that may not be the case. But if they hire for values and culture, and values and behaviors and competencies, it gives you a better shot, because now they're not trying to hire for that one little culture fit thing that they hire for. And so what you want to do is be prepared to answer values questions, and in a structured way. So using STAR, what I'm going to show you real quick is Sparkle that I use, and I'll tell you why. But pick any of these values that are there, or any competency or any skill, and you'll be able to fit this into this framework. So I'm going to share real quickly what Sparkle is. So it's the S is for what is the situation of the story, which you're already probably getting with STAR. What's the problem they were solving? What was your action? What are the results? And what do you know now? That's the SPARK. And you can do that with any question that they give you. That's a behavioral-based question, a competency-based question, any kind of question you can do that with. What the L is what are the lessons learned, right? What have you learned from this that you're going to apply in future situations? So it shows that you saw it, you reflected on it, you've come up with a way to move forward and not make the same mistake the same way again. And so that is always going to stand out. The other thing is the E in Sparkle is what evidence do you have that proves your outcome was successful, or you were successful, or whatever it is, or even what you just said is true. And so anything you can do around evidence, for instance, if we were interviewing a CFO and the CFO said, I really, we reduced our costs by this there, and we're interviewing that person. Well, if it's a publicly traded company, the evidence is, let's go look at the financials, and we could look at the financials of a publicly traded company and understand that. And so I'm sharing this with you because this framework and Spark and STAR, or whatever when you're using, when answering those questions will help. Because here's what happens with the interviewers. If the interviewer is trained, we train interviewers to listen in the Sparkle format. So they're listening. Did this candidate tell me what their scenario was? Did they describe this problem? Do I know what their role was in this process? Do I know the results? And did they actually learn from this experience? So Sparkle will help you tell any story that you're trying to tell, or STAR, whatever you're learning in the interviewer training. Any questions on that right now? All right. So I mentioned DICE. So what DICE is, this is fits into the Sparkle framework. It really fits in under the action and the results section of the Sparkle. And so what this is, it allows you to give more detail. So the D is for more data, more detail. So when you tell what you did, are you able to give them more data and detail around that, especially if they're probing you? And if they don't probe you, sometimes you want to give them that. You're also with the I in DICE stands for what was the impact and what was your influence. And so the action that you took and the results that you have, did they have an impact? Was there an influence? So you can actually speak to that in a way that is going to be beneficial to the business trying to solve their problem, or to this hiring manager trying to solve their problem.
I want to go teach at the Bauhaus.
The C, was there a question? Okay. The C in DICE is what was the collaboration, right? Who did you have to communicate with? What collaboration took place so that you are able
This
to
is the wrong thing for me.
the work you were doing?
This is all
then-
the wrong thing for me.
And then the E, somebody's not on mute. Okay. And then the E it reminds me of that Flow commercial or that Progressive Insurance commercial where the person was off mute and Flow and the insurers are there. We just had this happen yesterday. So when you look at the E is the execution, right? Did you execute this process with excellence? How did it go? How do you feel about it? And so I'm just sharing that. This is a lot of information, but it's just another way to kind of increase the story that you're telling and to bring it to life. All the transferable skills that you have, you can bring that to life for just about any role that exists. And if you've been working for a long time, you've got a lot of transferable skills that you can then bring to the table. It's just a matter of how do you frame them and put them into the scenarios that the interviewers are typically going to ask you. Let me check to see if there are questions. Any questions, comments, feedback on that? Okay. So I put this in a chart. I spent a bunch of time just doing charts and things like that. So I just threw this in a chart. It's certainly not big enough to put all the information in, but I took that list. So you can put any topic in this left-hand, go back. You can put any topic in this left-hand column. It could be skills, it could be values, it could be competencies, it could be behaviors. Across the top is the spark. So if you use star, you could put the star across the top. And so you could say, tell me about a situation, or tell me about a time when you had to demonstrate humility. You could say, this was my situation. Here's the problem we were solving. Here is the action. And under action, can you include details? Can you talk about the impact? Can you talk about who you collaborated with and communicated with, right? That's the first three letters of DICE. What the result was, how did it go, right? Did you execute this thing with excellence, and what will happen? And then what do you know now? What lessons did you learn? And what's the evidence that what you did was successful, or you could prove that it's true? And so that's just another tool that I use to frame the conversations that I'm prepping for. So what this really is it's about preparation and practice. If you do an exercise like this, whether it's STAR or SPARK or any mnemonic that you use, that preparation will get you ready for that interview, and you'll actually feel more confident and you'll know more because you've got a framework for answering just about any question they throw at you. So you're not rehearsing answers, you just understand the approach of how you do this. Someone said, how do you, let's see, is there a question? Great. Okay. The next thing is put yourself in the shoes of the interviewer and how would they sell a candidate on the opportunity. And this is a tricky one because people are, a lot of times we're going in and we're trying to sell the client on us. If you go into it with a little bit more, a little bit broader mindset of, if I were already in this company, what would I do to sell a candidate? What this does is it motivates you to research the opportunity and learn how do you sell. You know why you want it, but this actually underscores why you would want this opportunity. So you know how to sell the opportunity. You do research on the culture, so you would know how to sell the culture. You know what you're looking for. The team, this might generate questions that you would have about the team. Can you do research on these teams? But you'll still know how to talk about that team. At least you'll visualize it, right? I said start with the end in mind. Well, this also supports the start with the end in mind. You're making this more real. And then creating a great experience and an impression for the organization, right? What would you say to create a great impression for those candidates? Because what do you think impacts that candidate's experience? And companies are always talking about their employer brand. They're talking about how they develop people, how they support customers. Well, this gives you a way to kind of really look in and see, is this really happening? So I always tell people, do some research on the company and get a sense for what does that brand look like, right? Because everybody's going to be, they're either going to be, every candidate is going to be a customer, an employee, or a former customer, or a never customer because of the experience they have in your interview process. And so these are also things that you would be looking for. Candidates are going to become promoters. They're going to be neutral at best in some cases, or they're going to be a detractor. And it's the detractors that go and share the negative feedback on the company. And so, how would you treat a candidate when you're actually the candidate? Helps you with that kind of starting with the end in mind piece. Any thoughts on that or questions? So now I have a bunch of slides on interviewer, on how to interview. I mean, it's a whole another workshop, but it's on interviewer training. It sounds like you're already doing a bunch of that. And I spend time on what's the difference in a behavioral interview and a competency-based interview. How do you recognize? How do you look at those? I'm not going to talk about that specifically unless you want me to say something about those things. But what I do want to have you think about is a lot of times the burden is on the employer to make sure that they're not being biased in the interview. We need to shift our mindset as job seekers to check our own bias, right? How do I manage my bias as a candidate? Because you want to be able to flip this on its head. Like this whole conversation is about flip it on its head and be in control of this. And so when you as a candidate, I mean, how many times have you walked in and you thought, oh, this place isn't for me, right? Immediate bias that comes in because you saw one or two things. I mean, has anybody ever had that situation? Where you walked in and you thought, oh, no way, this is not the job for me. Yep, I see some yeses. And so what I'm challenging you to do is to avoid that shortcut, right? Because the way we protect ourselves is bias allows us to protect ourselves because we don't want to do something that we're not familiar with. So our lizard brain kicks in and we're like, oh, got to protect myself. But give yourself the chance to learn more, right? Recognize the bias and go, I'm going to get past this. And here are some of the terms that we tell ourselves. I can't really put my finger on it, but I've got a gut feel. This is from us as a candidate, right? Normally the interview teams are doing this, but if both sides of the communications equation are working on mitigating and managing their own bias, we get a better outcome. And so what candidates will say, and as well as interviews, I don't think this will be a culture fit, right? When you hear that, and I always tell people, hiring for culture fit kills your inclusion efforts, right? And so, because you're going to immediately go to that bias and you're going to say no hire. It's the safest thing to do. Something didn't feel right. I mean, if you've ever said these or heard these terms, it's there. I didn't like the way they communicated. I don't like their tone. I didn't like their accent. I didn't like the speed, the cadence that they spoke of. You may not say those things, but you're thinking it, right? I have a Texas accent. Every time I talk to someone from the East Coast, they're like, where are you from? And I'm like, Texas, right? So because they know. do I fit, right? When you interview, now we're not going on site as much for interviews, but we're doing video interviews all the time. When you see the interviewer, does that interviewer have tattoos? Do they have crazy hair? Do they have some kind of weird hoodie thing on? Is there something that's causing, do I like their name? Can I pronounce their name, right? Those are all things that kind of creep in. And a lot of times it creeps in on the employer side, but it also creeps in on the candidate side. And really the impact is it keeps you from delivering your best interview because you've got noise in your head that's causing you to miss information and to miss going forward because you might have walked in with your bias and decided, I'm going to go through this interview, but this is not the place for me. Well, right there, you've already taken a defeatist position where if you dig in and get more information, you're going to be able to make an informed decision. And so I guess the takeaway is put yourself in a position to make a decision and look at the values match and look at the behaviors you want to see in the industry versus kind of looking at that culture fit piece. I know I've got the slides. I'm doing a lot of talking, so feel free to interrupt me if if you've got something.
I just put something in the chat where I've heard so many people either look on the company website and see one of those pictures of the whole staff, and they'll look to see, do I see anybody like myself? Or they'll go into the company and they'll say, everybody there was in their 20s and 30s, and I knew right away that I was not going to get that job. All right, I didn't see anybody in the company who looked like me, so obviously I'm not going to get hired.
Yeah, no, that's a huge one. It's a huge one, and it really is one of those things where if you can mitigate that, and so here are some things you could do to kind of mitigate that exact thing, because that's what happens all the time. If you can recognize it when it's happening, then you'll find the trigger, right? You might have saw young people, you might have saw people that just didn't look like you, or it's in an industry that you've never been in, but you just learned how to do some of this stuff. You'll recognize that. And when you recognize those triggers, the best thing to do is just slow down. I mean, how many times do we hear, hey, just pause, take a deep breath? That really works. Take 3 deep breaths or 5 deep breaths or whatever it takes just to get you to pause and be still for a minute so you can collect your thoughts. And then do one thing different, one small thing different. For instance, you might ask a question. When you experience that, have a set of questions that you could actually ask. Hey, I'm feeling biased question. I'm going to ask one of these questions. Can you tell me more about X, right? Or how did they come to decide that? Or what's important? Just find something that you can ask, probe for more information to really help you dig in so that you don't allow your bias to cause you to miss out on information. So something in there. Someone said, I heard a coach say to their inner critic, oh, yes, I see. All right, that's a great one. Some great stuff coming into the chat box, and certainly feel free, anybody, to unmute on anything you want. So any questions on this or any comments or feedback, thoughts? How are we on time?
We're good. You got a late start.
Okay.
Cody, I just wanted to ask if it's ever would be wise to actually call attention to the difference and say, I think I'm older than most of your project managers, but I feel that with my years of experience, I tend to bring a lot of wisdom to the position. I mean, would it ever be okay in an interview to just come right out with the difference that you see?
Yeah, I would actually advise against doing that for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to put the interviewers into a space that I try to caution them to stay out of. Stay out of age, stay out of, where's a person from, right? That's a great question to ask you in an interview, but it starts to put them on a slippery slope. But the way I would address that difference, especially when you walk in and you can see everyone's 20 years old and you're not, is I would address it by looking at, hey, what's important for getting things done, right? How do you get things done? A lot of times they're going to say, we all get along, we work together, everybody's open, we're all about the same experience. They might say the same experience, that's just code for, hey, we're all in our 20s and young. I would stay away from it because one, you're gonna plant a seed in their head and they're gonna go, oh wow, this person is older than I am. So I think that I would not address that question that way.
Okay.
I would just mitigate against that mindset that you're going to have, or that a candidate would have, right? Saying, "Oh, wow, I'm older than these other people," and just look at the work, right? What needs to be done in the work, and what's required to get stuff done. Do they need somebody who knows how to learn? Do they need somebody who's hungry? All those things versus bringing that up because it will plant a seed in their head and they won't be able to get it out because you can't unsee it, right?
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Anything else on that? Anybody have any? Go ahead.
One of the things I put in the chat box was that, and I got this from a job seeker. I thought this was really a great question that they offered. At the very beginning of the interview, she said, before we get started, can you tell me what was it on my resume that made you want to talk to me today? And so if you are older or you are different, then that might be something where they say, you know what, in her case, they said, I like the fact that as a volunteer, you came up with a miniature golf event that raised $18,000 for a nonprofit. I love that, the energy and the entrepreneurial attitude or whatever it was.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a great way to get that conversation going. I mean, it's a great way to kind of get that elephant in the room out of the way. And so I think that's a great way to get that started.
Can I ask a question too about the age thing?
Yeah.
Twice now after interviews, I've been sent more paperwork, basically. And the one time it was very obvious that it was paperwork I had already filled out. And then the very last question was my age. Isn't that illegal? And how do I combat that?
So this is before you just went through interview. Was it a part of an application that they were sending, or is it just like?
I had already filled out the application, and then they sent me an email that said, oh, just a few more items. And the application, they asked me to fill out the application again. And then they had this one more question, and it was, what is your age?
Yeah, that's suspect. That's especially if that question's standing alone by itself, that's suspect for sure.
Right.
Definitely
right.
something that shouldn't be happening in the interview, and I don't necessarily see that age would be a factor for it. I mean, there's some organizations that it matters, right? Military, it's one, but it doesn't sound like you were joining the military. So.
No.
Yeah, those are ones that I would definitely not all the interviewers are capable, right? And the companies are capable, but that's definitely one their HR team would be looking at. So based on what I know, that doesn't sound like that should have happened that way.
So if that happens again, I just cross it off the list and say, well, this isn't going to happen. I mean, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, and I'm definitely not an attorney, but I believe that what I would always advise if there's something like that, it definitely seek real legal counsel. But I know that the hiring practices, that shouldn't be a factor in the hiring interview process. They're going to get that information once you're in the company, and it would come in on an application.
Right.
But yeah.
Right.
But as far as the mindset for applying to a role, I think the mindset would be, to address some of the things around, what are the requirements for this job, right? What are the must-haves for the job? The other thing that we're trying to get companies to do is focus on the must-haves, not all the nice-to-haves, because a lot of times when you focus on all the nice to haves, you miss the must haves, and you also miss out on some great candidates that bring a ton of transferable skills to the table.
Yeah.
Is there another question? Okay.
Somebody asked a question about dress. They said, suit or no suit for an insight interview. My background is finance and accounting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it depends on the company. And I would typically, what I do is I'll go and look at the company website to see what people are wearing. I definitely ask the recruiter, right? Hey, what is the dress code for this interview? I would ask the recruiter and have them, because they're going to say, business casual is the way to go, no tie. Right? Because people have triggers, right? They see you come in with a tie, they're thinking, oh my God. And so look at the people in the company already. Ask the recruiter, they're going to always be able to tell you, I don't like ties at all. And so I rarely show up for it with a tie, even in companies where their culture is tie based, right? I mean, I'm gonna come as who I am, but everybody can't do that. And so I would ask the recruiter on the tie, no tie thing, on the jeans, no jeans. Is it long sleeve shirt, short sleeve shirt? I would just ask these questions, because the recruiter's not going to expect you to know. And the industries are changing, right? The leadership's changing. People are working from home. I mean, I'd hate to be on the Zoom call and have everyone stand up, right? Everybody's got their top on, but they're in pajamas on, underneath. So as you start to look at more of these jobs, that's I think there's some flex happening there. Okay. One of the things, and I have other content that I want to make sure I show you a LinkedIn page and how to do something here. But I heard the conversation around video interviews. These are just high-level virtual interview tips. I'll send you the link to a webinar that we did on video and virtual interviews. But here's some of the big things that to pay attention to. Certainly, if you got to get yourself in a distraction-free environment, right? Preferably not on your phone either, because there's so many. The cell phones are problematic when you're doing the interview. If you don't have any other choice than do it that way, make sure that you've got a stable internet connection if that's at all possible. And then checking your computer's audio ahead of time, testing the webcam, making sure you've got a quality microphone. It makes a big difference in the interview. And when you're in that video interview, if it's a live two-way interview, then that's easier than the asynchronous one-way video interview. If you're being presented questions and then you're responding, my advice is always know that there's a person on the other side who's actually going to be watching that interview. So as best you can, keep your mind focused on the fact that I'm actually talking to a person. It's not natural to talk into a camera, but once you get that practice, and just practice, right? Dress professionally, print the resume, or print your any information that's relevant and have it available to you, just in case there's a glitch with the technology, which happens a lot. Having the notepad, I've gotten rid of writing on notepads, but I have my computer there, I'm taking notes. Whatever you use to take notes, be good there. Stay engaged during the interview, have those good questions, and then turn off the phone. I'm surprised my phone hasn't started ringing, but because I always forget to turn it off. But if you can turn the thing off, that's better. Practice, have some water, and then breathe and just have fun with it. Right? That's going to be some of it. I mean, I'm certainly happy to answer any video interview questions that you have. I know it's not the topic here, but part of telling your story is looking good on the video, in the sense that not looking great like a performer, but it's being prepared for that interview, having good questions, having a way that you're able to adjust from the bias that might show up for you. You can't control the interviewer's bias, but you can control your own bias and fear, and then being able to move forward and make your best presentation and be able to tell your story in a way that will ignite that interview process. So anything on that? Any questions on that? I was going to have this group do a practice interview and those things and some practice sharing, but I'm not going to do that. But what I did want to share with you real briefly is just is everybody here on LinkedIn?
Almost, yeah.
Okay.
99%.
So two of the things I want to show you is how to find information on the company and then how to look at the alumni. And so are you seeing a slow moving on?
Yes.
Well, that's it's LinkedIn Recruiter, which is not really what we want. Recruiters have a special version of LinkedIn that we use. And so if you just go to normal LinkedIn, and let's say we were going to look, let's look at a company. Let's just take down. Let's do Dell. It's local. So one of the things you can do is you can go to this company, right? And you can go to the company page, which a lot of people know how to do. But when you go to the company page, there's a lot of information that you can get. One of the things that you can certainly look at the about and get some information about the company from this section, number of employees, where they are, all those things. What's really powerful though is the fact that you can go and look and see the people. And so when you click on this people section, this is going to give you people that you might go network with. And if you're looking for people in a particular area, let's say you want somebody that's in the sales group. If you type sales in, this number reduced. And I'm filtering on sales. What's really powerful about this is you can see where these people live. You can see where they study. And where this becomes important is if let's say that's, hey, I went to the University of Texas as well. You can look these people up and their profiles are going to show up down here. So you can connect with them. You can spend some time talking with them. You can reach out to them. You can look at insights on the company. I'm not going to spend all the time. This is what we were talking about earlier when the question about attrition came up. You can look at the median tenure for the employees there, and you can also look at their growth, year-over-year growth. So if you wanted to get an idea of what attrition looked like, you could just go here and say, okay, in 2018, they had this many people. In 2019, they had this many people. And then you could just do the math and figure out, did they grow or did they shrink, right? Obviously, they grew. And so when you do that, it gives you an opportunity to do it. Actually, I would be looking at December to December, and I can see the difference between these two. And that'll give me an idea of how much attrition there actually was. Does that make sense? Everybody kind of, I know I went through that fast. Does everybody get that? Okay. So that's one of the things you can do. So let's take the other thing that's on the alumni search, and that would give you your list of people you want to go look for, which I think most people know. But let's say we decided to do University of Texas. So if I went to the University of Texas site, I can go and see what I want to look for is maybe that's a school that I went to. So I want to go and look at their alumni. So I click the alumni tab, and you can see 342,000 alumni that are listed here. I can see where they are, and it's powerful because I can see where they work. And if any of these companies are on my list of companies I want to work with, I can. You can also add other companies here if you want to see if you have anybody there. And you can decide what years do I want to look at. Like, this is a pretty broad range, but if you wanted to narrow that to a year, maybe it's the years that you were there, you can do that. You can also use this to find, let's say I was looking for sales. So I can see what alumni at that university work in sales. And this gives me where they live, and this tells me where they work. And so if I go back and I click on any of these, it's going to give me, so in our example, we use Dell. So I could click on Dell and I can see I'm filtering on Dell and sales, and I'm going to get the alumni from that organization. That's just another way to be intentional and deliberate about building out who you're going to reach out to. The other thing it allows you to do is you can look at job titles, right? So if you decide, hey, I know I want to be a program manager in this field, you can go look for program managers in the companies that have that title, and be able to reach out to them and see what their profiles look like and see what other people who work there, what their profiles look like. And then you can create your narrative using Spark or Star or whatever you use, to be able to tell that story and bring that to life. And so I just wanted to share that with you.
Cody, when you first pulled this up, we got a brief like behind the scenes look at what you see as a recruiter. Unless you don't want to share it, do you mind showing us so we can see what you as a recruiter are looking for when you're looking for people?
Yeah, let's do that. So let me pick somebody. I'm gonna pick Jeff Fisher. So let's say let's pick something like a program manager. So what I'm doing right now in the free version of LinkedIn, I'm typing program manager, and then I'm gonna look for people who are program managers. So I click on the people part. And when this comes up, let me just pick someone. Hopefully this person's not on here, but so let's see. So we picked this person. I don't know, but we did this person. What recruiters are going to see, if you have LinkedIn Recruiter, I'm going to see what you see as a person that's looking for someone with this background. The other thing, as a recruiter, if I have LinkedIn Recruiter, I can click on what it says called View in Recruiter, and recruiters have this seat, and so we can go, and we're going to see a little bit more. What it is, it gives us more outreach options, though, right? So I can certainly look at this person's public profile, which we were just on. I can also see what my team, if I'm working with a team, I can see, did anyone else on my team look at this person's profile? If someone else on my team looked at it, it's going to show me that. I can look at all this information, but I can also do different searches, right? I can add this person to projects. I can do feedback. If I've got their email address, I can add their email address. I've got other tools to use as a recruiter, which allows me to get this person's contact information, and I can reach out. Right now, I could reach out to this person through InMail and do something. I can also add this person to the project. If there are jobs that we had posted, I could add them to anything I wanted to. I could run a campaign. I could generate reports, not on this person, but on all the people for those roles. And it's also going to show me, very similar to what you see, other people with similar backgrounds. And then I can do some other searching that allows me to see more about that candidate, and I can create a search for that. So does that help?
Yeah, that's
Very
interesting.
revealing. Thank you.
Yeah. We have a lot of the recruiters definitely, and that's why I'm trying to put yourself in the mindset of a recruiter or of a private investigator. And it really makes a difference in kind of what you're able to find and who you're able to find and who you're able to engage with. So it's definitely one of those things where you're the candidate, but put yourself in the mindset of the person who's actually looking for the candidate, and think about the stuff that's why I asked that question in the beginning. Hey, who's actually been in that hiring process where you had to find people? Put yourself back in that mindset, and it will help a ton.
Can I ask you a similar question about LinkedIn? And I don't know that this has changed. I know in the past, it was really important that you show that you were currently working, that if you were not employed, that you didn't match up, because people would put in, project manager, currently working as a project manager. And so we advise people to show that they are currently working as whatever their job title is, and then how to do that, how to show that. Is that still the case? If somebody shows an end date and no current job, are they filtered out in most searches?
I think recruiter behavior is getting to the point where we know people have ended jobs, right? If you're doing something else, if your job ended and you're not, what you want to try to do is fill in things that you are doing, right? If let's say your job ended, but you're working on some project, you're doing some studying. There's a lot of free training that's out there. Some of the LinkedIn training is there. I think what they're going to be looking for is, hey, is this person still being productive? Or maybe you just took time off because you had to. You had a life event that said, look, I'm not going to be in the workforce right now, and it's okay. I think being able to tell your story, it's what I call a 1-minute story. If you can tell your 1-minute story, that makes a difference, and it makes you more real. And so, perfect case in point is, why does my company even exist? I can tell you, when I was a senior in high school getting ready to graduate, I'm not going to tell you my full life story, but I was anxious, very anxious about what I was going to do. I knew my parents didn't have the money to send me to college. I knew they didn't have the business connections to get me connected to a great opportunity to launch my career. So I did what a lot of 18-year-olds did. I joined the Navy. And I was fortunate that the Navy had a program called the Boost Program, where they were trying to get more women and people of color into the officer ranks of the Navy. And as a result, I went through that program, and it changed my life. And if I fast forward over the last several years, my teams have impacted thousands of lives because we've been intentional about trying to connect more great people to great opportunities. And so, had it not been for those events, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today about this. And so, I think being able to tell a little bit of that story makes it more real, and thinking about your why and where you want to be. That's what makes it more real. So, I mean, it's a long answer to your question, but I don't think it matters as much as it did previously.
Yeah, this was just on the mechanics of the search engine on LinkedIn. Certainly, you have to be able to explain what you've been doing for the last year or whatever and why, and that stuff in an interview. But in terms of a recruiter doing a search on LinkedIn, they're going to put a job title in, and they're going to put keywords in, and then just from the recruiter algorithm, do they put people? Do they only want to see people who are currently employed?
Yeah, I don't know if the algorithm is doing that. Sometimes the recruiter might manually do that, yeah, right? But it's always, I always just try to look for the accuracy. But I'll find out how the algorithm is working and whether it's doing that. LinkedIn's you always want to have that. If you're open to work, make sure you have that box checked on open to work, right? You don't necessarily put that ring around your profile, but having that box checked, I think, is helpful. But I'll find out. Algorithm.
Okay. Thank you. That was great. Anything else that you want to say? Anything else that anybody wants to ask him?
Well, Kathy, there are some things in the chat box that I think need to be addressed.
Okay, I've been looking at them and I didn't see them.
Cody, what do you think of adding the open to work frame on your profile pic? I've heard mixed messages on whether or not to use it.
Yeah, for me, I don't look at it as an issue. Recruiters are having big conversations about it. Everybody's having conversations. There's so many opinions out there about that. I don't think it hurts a person either way, right? I think it's more quickly going to let somebody know, yes, I'm open to work. Because as a recruiter, I'm going after people. I don't care if they have that on there or not. If they have it, it's not a negative for me. Not every recruiter's in that space. I think so it's always going to be opinion, right? You can ask 5 recruiters and we're all going to have a different opinion on it. Because I'm looking for the talent, and I'm looking for the people that have the transferable skills for the work. And I'm usually going to push to advocate for somebody who has transferable skills, even if they don't have exactly what that client looks for. But my short answer is, I don't think it matters that much. We just find reasons to complain in the recruiting space because we just do. So.
And there's another, Woody says he has premium LinkedIn, but he doesn't have that ability to search the way you were doing, looking for alumni. And somebody else mentioned that too. So I don't know if that's something that is.
You can do that with the when you look up people and you look up all filters, you can go into that site and put in the school and it'll do the same thing. It's just not on their company page.
Yeah, okay. And so let me just pull that up real quick. So if you were on LinkedIn, let's say you were on a person's page, is that what you're saying? Oh, you're saying, let's say I was looking for program managers. Let's just do that. So if I did this search program manager, what comes up is, okay, here's all this program managers. There's a thing called all filters. You can look at all the filters here. Are you saying, is it Woody that said, Woody, you don't see the schools thing? Is that what you're not seeing?
No, I think you went from the company page to people.
Oh yeah.
On one of the horizontal links, and in with those list of horizontal links, there was a link for alumni. So it was company alumni, and I don't, the links appear on mine differently because I'm trying to follow along and do what you're doing. I've only got home, about, jobs, people, videos, and insights, but my links are over on the left-hand side. They're not along the top.
Yeah. So if I look at this, so when I went to companies, in this case, this is giving me some companies with those pages. But when I originally did the search, I searched on Dell.
Right.
And what you're not seeing is this part. And I'm happy to get with you and do a screen share to kind of see if there's a workaround for it. You're not seeing all these options, right? Is that correct?
Right. They're not there. They're down the left.
Oh.
So for Dell, I've got videos because apparently, and events because they've apparently got them posted, but there's nothing there for. I thought there was a link for alumni.
Yeah, they make a list on the left-hand side instead of across.
Yeah, you're seeing the left-hand side on there, and it could be because of the version of LinkedIn. I'm always getting upgraded to something different, so it could be that, or it could be something else. I can look at it with you. And it could be hidden, right? I just heard somebody say something about the alt filters and how to get there, which is probably on mine's going to show up differently, but I'm happy to get a screen share from somebody and figure it out.
Right. Yeah, I've had mixed luck using the alt filters. It's a little funny sometimes, but
yeah.
So when you were looking up alumni, were you looking at from the company site, or were you looking from a school site, or?
Yeah, I went to the Dell main Dell page, and when I got on that main page, is it going to show me?
It might have been through people.
Oh, okay. So when I got on the main page, this is to let me look at people. Oh, I know. The alumni was on a school. It's for a school.
Okay.
So the way to get this is go to people. The alumni was for the school.
That was my mistake. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, perfect. So when you go to University of Texas, then they give you this.
The alumni wasn't for school because it showed all the different people from different schools. Remember, it had Texas State had this many people working there, and it had A&M. There were this many people working there, but that wasn't at UT, right? Was that at UT?
Right.
People from all those different schools working there. Is that what it was?
Yeah. So let me make sure I don't have anyone confused. So what I did at first is I went to Dell. So I went to the Dell website, and from the Dell site or the Dell LinkedIn page, and from one of the first things I did from that is I went to people on the Dell page, and when I click on people, it's going to bring up this group of people.
Yeah, where they studied.
It's going to show me where they studied, right? And so that comes from here are the people, here's where they live, here's where they study. That's what I pulled up on that one, which is different. Now, if I went to the University of Texas, if I click this is going to give me the people at Dell who went to the University of Texas. And so I filtered it here. Does that make sense? And then it's going to show me. So I'm filtering on Dell. I'm filtering on people that went to the University of Texas at Austin. And then it shows me these people. So I'm happy to spend some time with anybody that wants more on it, or I'll just create a link video and send it out. And your interface might look a little different than mine, just because maybe the way I configured something. Great.